Some horror stories don't begin in haunted houses. They begin in cities we know. Streets we walk. They don't need ghosts. Because sometimes real life gives us something far more terrifying. Tonight, you'll hear 3 stories. Different, but all based on real events. Or close enough to real you'll wish they weren't. And before we begin, if you enjoy unsettling tales, true horror, and stories that leave your skin crawling long after the screen fades to black, you can subscribe to the channel and hit like on this video. It helps us bring more stories to life and keeps you close to the darkness. I live in Spokane, Washington, a city just quiet enough to get forgotten, but not small enough to feel comforting. The kind of place where people know the streets, but not each other. Where neighbors wave, but never ask questions. Where you can disappear in the plain sight. That's always worked for me. I've never wanted attention. I don't chase promotion, ambition, or love. I rent a modest 2-room apartment above a shuttered laundromat on the north side. The windows rattle in the wind. The floor creaks in 3 specific spots. It smells faintly of dust and old detergent, but it's mine. I've worked at the same job for almost 10 years now, retail at a hardware store. It's not glamorous, not exciting, but it's stable. I help customers find screws that never fit their drill heads. I unload boxes, and sometimes I change light bulbs. The money barely covers rent, utilities, and groceries. But that's all I really need. I'm not chasing anything anymore. I just want peace. No family. No friends to speak of. No social media. No trail. I come home each night, heat up a microwavable dinner, sit in the same chair, and watch reruns of shows I've already memorized. It's a quiet life. Lonely, maybe, but safe. Or so I thought. Everything changed last summer. The first body turned up in early June. Local news said it was a woman, mid-30s, found in her apartment with deep wounds on her chest. Carved into the skin were the initials RK. It was horrifying but abstract. Murders happen, that's what I told myself. Then another, same initials, then a third, then a fourth. It became a pattern. The media dubbed the killer the initial killer. They said it with a kind of breathless fascination, the way they always do with serial killers. As if giving him a name made him a story, not a person. Everyone panicked. People changed their locks, canceled trips, carried pepper spray. Me? I stayed calm. My initials are JM. I figured I wasn't in his pattern. No one knew me. I had no online presence, no family. I barely interacted with people. I convinced myself there was no reason I'd ever appear on that man's radar. But then the feelings began. It started at the store. A tingling between my shoulder blades, like someone was standing just out of sight. I turned quickly, no one there. One night I closed up early and saw a figure across the parking lot, tall, motionless, watching. I blinked and he was gone, or so I thought. Another night, walking home, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, careful. When I turned, there was only the empty street and the soft glow of the street lamps, but I couldn't shake the feeling. It followed me home and crept into my dreams. Then the 7th victim. They found her in a downtown parking garage, slumped against the wall like she had sat down to rest. Same wounds, same position. But this time the initials were different. They were mine. JM. I didn't move for hours after reading that. I stared at the article, the grainy security cam still they'd posted, the clinical language of the coroner's report. Lacerations consistent with prior victims, carved into the chest, JM. There are coincidences, sure, but this wasn't one. I knew. I don't know how, some instinct buried deep, but I knew. He was coming for me. I stopped sleeping. I kept every light in the apartment on. I stacked the furniture behind the door. When I walked to work, I took different routes every time, but the feeling didn't go away. The sensation of being watched became constant. My neck was always tense, my muscles tight. I couldn't breathe fully. I was unraveling. Still, life pressed on. I had to work. I needed the hours. Bills don't wait for fear. One night, after a late shift, I was walking home. It was cold for summer, the kind of cold that feels wet in your lungs. The air was still, no cars, no birds, just the soft buzz of overhead wires. And then I heard it. Footsteps, but not casual, wandering footsteps. These were deliberate, powerful. Each one echoed off the pavement. It felt like the rhythm of a predator closing in on prey. His footsteps were so heavy, I could almost feel the ground vibrate with each one, closing the distance between us faster than I could comprehend. I turned and saw a figure sprinting toward me, shirtless, pale, massive, his mouth stretched in a twisted grin, and worse than the image was the sound. He was laughing. A terrible, broken laugh. It scraped the air, wild and unhinged, filled with something gleeful and hungry. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just ran. Not toward my apartment. I didn't want to lead him there. I cut down an alley, leapt a fence, stumbled through a drainage path, and burst out into the woods beyond the industrial park. The trees swallowed me instantly. Branches tore at my arms. Roots grabbed at my ankles. My lungs burned. My vision blurred. Behind me, he followed. I heard his boots smashing the undergrowth. I could feel him closing in, breathing hard, the laughter fading into growls. But then, the air changed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in a single breath. The humidity vanished. Even the night sounds, insects, leaves, distant traffic, faded. Something was wrong in those woods. The deeper I went, the more twisted the trees became. Their branches didn't grow up. They reached sideways like arms stretching. The light from the moon seemed to bend. The shadows moved. Then the laughter stopped. I slowed, hidden behind a fallen log, gasping, shaking. The forest was silent, not just quiet. Silent, no footsteps, no wind, no movement. Minutes passed, then maybe hours. I didn't dare move. Not until the first light of dawn bled through the trees. They found his body just beyond the tree line. Leonard K. escaped from a psychiatric facility. 40 years old, 6 confirmed murders. Mine would have been the 7th. The officers said his corpse was unlike anything they'd seen. Arms bent backwards, eyes wide, spine twisted so badly he couldn't have done it to himself. They asked me to identify him. I didn't want to, but I did. When they pulled back the sheet, I saw something I can't forget. His mouth open in a scream. His body wrung like wet cloth, as if something had grabbed him and twisted until he snapped. I didn't speak. I didn't sleep. For weeks, I tried to convince myself it was justice. But deep down, I know something else was in those woods that night, and whatever it wasn't done. It started like any other Thursday. I was sitting in my small kitchen, eating reheated lasagna from a plastic container, and half watching the evening news on an old flat screen that flickered with every gust of wind. The sound was uneven, and half the screen was permanently darkened from an old fall. But it worked. It was part of my routine. I didn't need much, just noise to drown out the quiet. I lived alone in a rental that hadn't seen a new coat of paint in decades. The wallpaper curled at the corners, and the linoleum peeled near the fridge. But rent was cheap, and I didn't have anyone to impress. I wasn't expecting anything more from life. Then I heard my name. Not just my first name, not a shared last name, my full name. Spoken clearly by the newscaster. I blinked and turned to the TV. A photo was on screen, a grainy, outdated ID photo, but it was unmistakably me. Pale face, sunken eyes, the same crooked nose I'd broken years ago playing backyard football. Underneath, the words, "Local man found dead, identity confirmed." I froze. At first, I thought it was a prank. Maybe someone stole my identity, or a clerical error, but the report went on. They described a body found in a vacant field on the outskirts of the city. No signs of trauma, no identification on the body. But fingerprints and dental records confirmed the name. My name. Then came the part that chilled me. No next of kin, no known relatives. Lived a solitary life. I dropped my fork. The sound echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Panic surged up through my chest, sharp and immediate. I ran to the bathroom, turned on the light, and stared into the mirror. I was still here, still breathing, still alive. But I looked wrong, washed out, like something had been drained from me overnight. My phone was dead, completely. No signal, no charging screen, nothing. I tried the wall charger, a portable battery. Nothing worked. I went outside. The hallway felt darker than usual. The overhead bulbs buzzed with that sickly yellow glow. I passed my neighbor, an elderly woman who always waved at me. She didn't wave this time. She didn't even look at me. She turned around the moment she saw me and hurried back inside. On the street, people moved around me like I wasn't there. I shouted, waved. One man bumped into me and didn't react, like I was air. I ran to the gas station across the street. The door chime rang when I entered, but the clerk didn't look up. I stood directly in front of him and asked, "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Then I looked at the security mirror above the counter. I wasn't in it. My reflection, gone. I stumbled backward. My heart pounded so loud I thought I might pass out. The ground felt uneven, my vision blurred. I left. I ran home and locked every door, every window. I pulled the curtains shut. Sat in the middle of my room, knees to my chest, trying to make sense of it all. That night, I turned on the TV again. The same news segment played, only now it ended differently. A timestamp, date of death, tomorrow. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I sat in that spot until the sky began to brighten. Then I moved to the couch and sat there too. At 2:47 a.m., the doorbell rang. Once, I didn't move, then again. Longer, louder, then a knock, then two more, then silence. When I finally opened the door, there was no one there, but on the ground was a piece of paper, clean, white, folded once, typed in bold black letters, "You've already died, you're just catching up." The hospital didn't believe me, of course. They thought I was having a breakdown. I probably was. But they couldn't identify me in their system. No driver's license, no birth record, no social or tax ID, no emergency contacts. They said I didn't exist. But I'm still here, aren't I? Burnout had gnawed through me for months. My boss kept piling on hours. My girlfriend left, saying I wasn't emotionally present. I'd wake up every morning feeling like a stranger in my own skin. So I left. I found a cabin online, cheap, rustic, deep in the Vermont woods. The listing promised solitude, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just a small wood cabin, a stove, and miles of pine forest in every direction. I packed light, a few clothes, a journal, some books. I didn't plan to talk to anyone. I didn't even tell friends where I was going. I needed this, real silence. The first night was peaceful. The air smelled like pine needles and smoke. I lit a fire, read by candlelight, fell asleep to the sound of crickets and distant owls. The next morning, there was a lock on the door I didn't remember. It was new, clean, a slide bolt installed from the inside. I checked the listing photos. It wasn't there. I would have remembered. It wasn't old or dusty. It looked freshly installed. I shrugged it off. Maybe the owner added it after posting the photos. Maybe I'd missed it somehow. But the next morning, there were two. Another bolt and a chain lock. Same polished metal, same clean installation. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up to faint sounds, clicks, groans, a hum that vibrated through the walls. By the fourth day, there were 7 locks on the door, all from the inside, all secure. I searched the entire cabin for signs of entry. Windows untouched. No footprints outside. I set up my phone to record overnight, but when I checked it, the file was just static. One night, I stayed up with a knife in my hand, sat facing the door until dawn. Around 3:14 a.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of metal sliding into place. Click. Another lock had appeared. I stood, heart thundering. I reached out. The bolt was real. Cold, perfectly mounted. I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I looked out the window. There were footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, dozens. All around the cabin, circling, some small, some long. Some with 6 toes, some with claws. I packed everything in 10 minutes. As I loaded the last bag into my car, I looked back. There was something, standing in the loft window, but the cabin had no second floor. I didn't stop driving until I hit a diner 3 towns over. I sat there until sunrise, trying to explain to the waitress why I couldn't stop shaking. When I tried to find the listing again, it was gone. Maybe what makes these stories terrifying isn't that they happened, but that they could. A man chased through the woods by something worse than a killer. A name on the news that doesn't belong to the dead, yet. A cabin locking itself from the inside, while footsteps circle in the dark. These aren't just tales to scare you before bed, they're warnings. Whispers from the edge of what we understand. Reminders that not every locked door keeps things out. Sometimes they're there to keep things in. So the next time you feel watched or hear something move where it shouldn't, don't brush it off too quickly. Because some things don't need to be seen to be real. And if you've made it this far, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share your own strange encounters in the comments. Sleep well.